Geppetto at first glance might have one of the most off-putting playstyles because he can't do a lot on his own. His attack is pretty slow and clunky, he has a hammer windup that does little damage, he can throw out a small AoE bomb that does mediocre damage, and can apply a shield to himself with an iframe. His trait is the final piece to this puzzle that brings everything together and creates a dummy. Learning Geppetto is learning how to incorporate all these abilities with his dummies, then learning how to properly place and move your dummies around a fight. This is my guide on how to play Geppetto. Now this guide will have 3 parts. The first will cover general ideas for all playstyles, the second will focus on the starting talents and what to pair with them and how those play, and last I will just cover the rest of his talents individually to see what I like together. Without the help of talents or his ultimate, Geppetto can have 3 dummies out at once. They have their own health bar and can be destroyed. They can also be picked up or will disappear if you move too far away from them. This is helpful knowledge because if you have 3 dummies out, your cooldown for your trait won't start until one of your dummies disappears. If you find them in a bad position, sometimes it'll be quicker to go pick up a dummy instead of letting them slowly spin their way over to you. Geppetto's power can smack dummies through enemies and help reposition them. To me, this is one of the strongest level 1 powers in the game combined with a dummy. Think about this power how you would Beowulf's power, Pied Piper's power at night, or Melusine's special. In most cases, you'll want to line up enemies and hit as many as possible. You can also use this to reposition your dummies if they are far away from a fight. The last thing to keep in mind is that this also helps getting your dummies out of danger. Your dummies will draw a lot of aggro, so if you see an enemy about to attack a dummy, most times you can find an angle to hit them through the enemy to safety while you yourself aren't in the enemy's attack range. His special is a bomb that can be tapped to throw right in front of you or held down to throw farther. This bomb heals your dummies for 40% of their maximum health, so you'll normally want to use your power to smack a dummy into a group of enemies and follow up with the special once you see an enemy starting to attack your dummy, to heal it while also getting some decent AoE damage in. His defense applies a shield for him and his dummies that works as an iframe as well. For those that don't know, some abilities in this game have iframes, or immunity frames, meaning that if you activate it right as you're about to get hit, you'll completely ignore any damage. The exception to this in this game are the big slam attacks that have red outlines on the floor. Lastly, his attack can heal dummies for 15% of their health with each hit, and I bring it up last because you won't be using it a lot except for a few builds with Geppetto. I'll only really use my attack as Geppetto if I'm using a pretty specific build or if all my dummies are out and there's nothing else to do but use attack. Basically, his attack is the weakest element of his kit, and it's normally better to position yourself for a good power hit than it is to chip away at a single enemy with your attack. Now moving on to his starting talents and how they change his playstyle, and a little bit on how to build each playstyle. In my opinion, Geppetto's best starting talent is Dummy Ball. When you use your special, a dummy spawns where the bomb explodes. The reason I favor this over all the other starting talents is it's the most consistent when it comes to getting dummies out the quickest, because you can get more special charges and reduce your special cooldowns. The early game with Dummy Ball is probably one of the safest playstyles in the game, as your dummies will almost always be taking enemy attention away from you. And this is how I think Dummy Ball is best played. To explain this, Geppetto has some talents that benefit more from him being right next to his dummies, almost like a barrier between him and the enemies, but I think this playstyle better works with a different starting talent. And Dummy Ball works best when dummies are far away from him. Abilities that work well with distance like Forked Lightning, Laser Lenses, Sharp Noses, and probably my 2 favorite talents to pair together, Magnetic Hammer and Flux Capacitor, are what you're going to be looking for with this. Your rotation with a build like this would be to use your talent to create a dummy, then power to smack it into a group of enemies, then follow up with your special into a group and a second if you have in charge, to heal your first dummy and get your others out. Then use defense to trigger Forked Lightning between all the enemies and you, and it activates Flux Capacitor, which allows you to use your power with Magnetic Hammer to pull all your dummies in and smack them back into the group of enemies. This playstyle gives you a bunch of flexibility to move your dummies around a fight and helps keep you at a distance for most of it. The best magical objects for a build like this are going to be charges for everything, having multiple specials is good for getting dummies out, defense to activate Flux Capacitor, power charges to pull dummies in and send them out over and over if you have magnetic hammer. I prefer the overclock ultimate with this build as it really helps you clear camps as your dummies. If you can get all of them out really quick and then activate your ultimate, they're going to spin around and just clear a camp. And the final upgrade to this, especially with flux capacitor and magnetic hammers, is really good. Every time you use your power on an enemy, your dummies essentially will do a mini ultimate and they'll spin around. If you can have large family and pull 4 dummies at once and then smack them out, you're going to have 4 dummies spinning around. It's basically having a mini ultimate, and it's really good in this build. Now the next starting talent I'm going to talk about, to me, isn't his second best, but it's easier to recommend and is still pretty good. This talent is Twin Dummies. Twin Dummies will spawn 2 dummies instead of 1, starting at a 55% chance and becoming a 100% chance at Legendary. One of the tough things with this is that you really want it at Legendary because you want both dummies out, but because it's percent based, sometimes it'll work every time at Epic if you're lucky. But you really want to be spawning both dummies at once in this build. And I'll break this playstyle down to show you exactly how something like this happens. This style of play is almost the exact opposite of how I played Dummy Ball. I like to sit right behind my dummies and heal them with special, use defense to keep them alive, and then use power when there's a big group or when one of them is about to die. This build is also dependent on having your dummies out and keeping them alive, so talents like Heart Ties, which lets your dummies share some of your vitality, and Large Family, which lets you have one more dummy out and reduces your trait cooldown, are really important. Talents that can combine with each other to benefit from you being right next to your dummies are super beneficial here as well. The combo of Oiled Mechanisms, dummies hit by your attack will instantly trigger an attack. Family Meeting, when 3 or more dummies are out, you and your dummies gain attack speed. And Sharp Noses, dummies have a 50% chance of attacking with a large amount of additional damage, can stack up damage incredibly quickly. But to me, the most valuable part of a build like this is taking Clockwork Medicine and Fireworks. Clockwork Medicine will apply regeneration to your dummies, healing them for a certain amount every second. Fireworks will send out a firework every time a dummy regains a certain percentage of health, 15% if all the way upgraded to Legendary. The dummy doesn't need to have taken damage for Fireworks to work, so if you have a group of 3 dummies out in front of you and Fireworks is all the way upgraded, you can throw your special into a group, instantly healing them all for 40%, which will send out 2 fireworks from each dummy. Then the regeneration effect from Clockwork Medicine will keep on proccing fireworks as you continue to attack the group of dummies, sending out more and more fireworks. Magical objects that work really well with this build are Horn of Plenty for more vitality for your dummies to combine with Heart Ties, Ogre's Blood because you're already stacking vitality, and finally Mermaid Tears, which will add more healing to your dummies, sending out more fireworks when you heal them. If you have the build set up correctly, then you've effectively built a wall of unkillable dummies in front of you that send out constant damage with fireworks, and if anything gets close, it'll be killed by the dummies from Oiled Mechanisms and Sharp Noses. Now, Twin Dummies, the ultimate I prefer is Mecha Puppet, even though you're going to have a lot of dummies out. It's basically just another dummy that you get to set out in front of you and smack over and over, and this one actually does a lot more damage, so I prefer Mecha Puppet here. The downside to this playstyle is that it's very slow getting through the early game, as you want to stay more stagnant, and it's harder to move your dummies around. You're also pretty dependent on your talents and what order they come in. If you take a few pieces of a combo but you don't get the whole thing, it'll take a bit of time before you start seeing any real damage with this build. The next starting talent is Unstable Cores, and this is one of the most challenging playstyles in the game to make effective, but it is really strong if you can make it work. With Unstable Cores, dummies need to survive 5 seconds to become unstable. Once unstable, they can be hit with power, dismantled, or destroyed to explode, dealing a bunch of damage. Unstable Cores requires your dummy management to be super efficient, as the build is entirely dependent on your ability to keep them alive for 5 seconds, then to place them correctly to do the most damage possible. I like to place my dummies a bit early when going into a fight when I'm playing Unstable Cores. If I can have one of them alive for 2 seconds before triggering an attack from the enemy, then I've already done 40% of the job. You want to wait to use your power to hit your dummy into an enemy, but to the edge of a group so that it doesn't instantly die in the middle of a group before becoming unstable. Your special and defense also need to be timed well to keep the dummy alive. I like Heart Ties in this build, as your dummies get to share some of your vitality, which just can help keep them alive for a few more seconds so that they can become unstable. Other talents that are good are some of the options that trigger on defense, as you'll likely be looking for defense charges to spam to keep your dummies alive. Large Family is good specifically for the trait cooldown. It's going to be very rare that you ever have 4 dummies alive at once while using Unstable Cores. Morning Rage is the only talent that triggers when dummies are destroyed, so it's an easy pick. Flash of Genius is also good here because there isn't too many talents that are necessary with this build, so the extra magical objects should help. One talent that I would 100% recommend looking for though in this build is Vacuum Capsule. This talent will pull dummies towards the center explosion of your special, so it's a great tool in keeping them away from a big hit that would kill them before becoming unstable. It also gives you a great way to reposition your dummies to explode if they are unstable but are in an unsafe position for you to go pick them up or hit them with a power. The upside of playing with unstable cores is a huge burst of damage and stagger if placed well, but the downside is that with poor positioning or the inability to keep your dummies alive, will just completely stop this build. With unstable cores, I prefer to have Mecha Puppet as my ultimate. Overclock isn't going to be too efficient because I'm not going to have that many dummies out, and when I hit them with power, they're going to explode anyways, so just go with Mecha Puppet. Now, his final starting talent, Rocket Science, is really hard for me to recommend. All the other starting talents alter Geppetto's gameplay around his puppets in a way that makes sense to me. Rocket Science just allows him to do another thing. He gets a long dash that can apply Ignite to enemies that does below average damage. My only thinking as to why it's here is that it allows you to quickly move around to other dummies to reposition them, but I don't really think that's worth it for a starting talent. It's a weird addition as the jetpack applies Ignite, which has no other synergies with any other talents. I think there's so many better ideas for a talent if they wanted to include Ignite. Here's my idea. Special applies Ignite to dummies and enemies, and then dummies do a % base damage while ignited. This way you can make a build that focuses on hurting your dummies with Ignite, but trying to counter it with things like Clockwork Medicine to keep them alive and allow them to continue doing more damage. Sorry for the lack of tips with Rocket Science. I've done a few full runs with the ability, and I really focused on the dash ability and try to pair it with Witch's Broom, which was able to dash back and forth between enemies while being intangible, but it really didn't make a difference in the run, and it wasn't better than any other of his starting talents. The final boss of this run took forever with this build, so I don't know, I'd never have found it to be worth it. Okay, let's talk about his talents. Okay, now to just look at his talents and go through these and see what I like and what I think pairs well. Nailing Strike is probably my least favorite one of his talents. If you like this in the comments, please explain to me why. It adds an additional hit to his attack combo. It's a very, very slow hit, and it does a bunch more damage, but again, I'm rarely ever getting through a full attack combo as Geppetto. I'm not focused on his attack. The only reason I could think is say you have twin dummies and you have large families, and you have the one that does family medium where you have bonus attack speed. This final bit of the combo might allow you to smack and hit them all at once. Oh yeah, and pair this with oiled mechanisms. It might let you hit them all at once, where sometimes it's hard to hit them all with oiled mechanisms. I just don't think it's worth it. I think there's other things that are going to be more efficient. Again, oiled mechanisms I think is great. I think it's great to pair with twin dummies because you can set out two dummies in front of you and just smack them right away, instantly get that damage going. Pair it with family meeting to boost your attack speed so that you're hitting them quicker. And also pair it with Sharp Noses so that Sharp Noses can proc more often. I think this is, I think these three together are very, very good together. Heart Ties I think is one of his most like underrated abilities, keeping them alive. You know, unstable cores it works with twin dummies. It can even work with Dummy Ball if you're allowing them to do things like Sharp Noses or stuff and you want them to stay out longer. I think Heart Ties is really, really good. Forked Lightning I think is a really, really good ability. It helps with boss damage. The build that I said with Dummy Ball, so here, let me skip ahead real quick. With Flux Capacitor, when Geppetto has shield, power affects all dummies within range. If you have that combined with Magnetic Hammer, holding power will pull in a dummy in front of Geppetto and then release the dummy. You can pull in all of your dummies. If you have large family, that means you can pull in all 4 dummies if you have a shield on Geppetto with Flux Capacitor. It's such good damage on a boss. You'll activate your defense to get this, smack them across, activate defense again, get this. If you have Vacuum Capsule, which is really good, you could toss a special in front of you, pull them all back, then pull them all back again with Magnetic Hammer. I think it's a really, really good ability if you have a way to keep on hitting dummies on another side of you. Large family is really, really good. Having the trait cooldown is really beneficial, especially with twin dummies. I think it's the best thing to pair with twin dummies, and then unstable cores. I also think twin dummies works really, really well with explosive builds. I don't think it's necessary. I think this was the final talent they added. I wish it was something to do with Ignite or when your dummies are destroyed. It's not necessary with twin dummies. I actually think if you get it, maybe take it, but I think the combination of the other 7 talents that you want are going to be a lot better than taking explosive builds. Morning Rage, I don't don't depend on it if I ever do dummy ball or twin dummies. I only take it really with unstable cores. Most of the times if I'm playing dummy ball or twin dummies, I want my dummies to stay alive, and I'm playing a build where I just try to keep them alive throughout an entire fight. Pogo hoppers is, I think they actually buffed this. It used to be really, really bad. I think they buffed it to where the dummies attack a lot farther now. I don't think it's necessary if you get good with Geppetto, or if you're getting like better with Geppetto, because you'll just get better at positioning your dummies. Early on when you're playing him, it is a pretty good ability because your dummies are just guaranteeing a hit on things more often if they can move farther. Already talked about this. Here is one of like the dream combos. If you get fireworks all the way upgraded, and then you get clockwork medicine all the way upgraded, and all your dummies are in one spot together, throwing a special in and healing them all and activating fireworks is really, really powerful. Already talked about this. Laser lenses is probably my favorite of the defensive perks. It takes a little bit of time, so if your dummies die, they won't get to activate it, but it does a lot of damage and they can hit things from a very far range. So if you have dummies way off in the middle of nowhere, you can activate it and they might be able to snipe something with laser lenses. Vacuum capsule, again, I like it. I think the skill ceiling on it is pretty high. I think it's hard to be really efficient with it. I like playing it the most with unstable cores because I'm more focused on where my dummies are more than any other build. Sharp noses is really good. It's pretty much good in every build he has. It just allows your dummies to do good damage more often. Flash of Genius, I think, can be taken in a few of his builds, especially if you get the thing to re-roll all your talents in the Sandman shop. If you can just take all of these and then re-roll your talents, that's going to be pretty nice. But I would mainly take it with unstable cores. Lightning Rod dummies is probably my least favorite of the defensive talents, but it works pretty well with twin dummies if you're just stacking all your dummies right in front of you on a group of enemies, because the lightning strike will just all be in front of you, hit a big group of enemies. It's okay. And then these two, they are just your ultimate upgrades. I really, really like high voltage. I think it's a great ultimate upgrade. And bombers are, honestly, Geppetto is a character that taking 2 ultimates is really, really nice if you have Mecha Puppet. These do a bunch of damage and a bunch of stagger. So yeah, that's Geppetto. He's one of my favorite characters currently. He's kind of weird and kind of slow to play, but he's really, really fun once you start to learn him. All right, peace.